Hey, Ethan, we're going to start now. Hello, this is Matt Bergman, and you are listening to the Punk Rock Libertarians Podcast, episode 30.
The Dirty 30.
Ethan said that earlier, dude.
Yeah, but that was not
Ethan
recorded.
Columbus that term, dude. Pay him a nickel.
Yeah, I don't remember
Pay him a
murdering
nickel.
any natives.
Hand over the
Did you
jugal.
say I Columbused that term?
You did, dude.
I don't remember him like
I've never heard that before.
killing women and children.
Well, that's because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
True.
Yeah, so, it's pretty awesome this week in the news. You know, I saw the Darafrim guy, he's kind of pissed off because there's a new company called Imprimis Pharmaceuticals, and they created a generic version of Darafrim. Darafrim is the AIDS drug that was up until recently $13.50 a pill, and then they were bought. I guess like the rights to make the drug was bought out by some dude and his pharmaceutical company, and they raised the price to, I believe it's like $750 per pill. So last month there was this big stink about it. And I mean, of course, that's a shitty thing to do. I mean, everybody's getting pissed and people are blaming capitalism when, it's not really, it's not really, capitalism isn't to blame. Like the regulations are to blame, because under capitalism, somebody could just make a cheaper drug, a cheaper version of that
Regulations and patents, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's one thing I don't understand because I've heard about this story, but what I don't understand is how he was he bought, I guess, like the patent to the drug or the right to sell this drug, but then somebody came in and is now selling like a substitute. So I'm guessing it's not just like a generic version, but it's like a substitute for that drug that somebody else is selling.
If I remember correctly, he didn't actually buy the patent. He bought the rights to that specific production of the drug. Is the way I understood it.
Okay, so like a certain method of production or something.
Not necessarily. I think he just bought like the name.
I would be curious to hear.
Well, that would make sense.
Like, does anybody know if the Darafrim guy like came out this week complaining or anything, or like? Because I'm sure. Aren't you curious what he has to say about it?
The whole thing was just weird and fishy from the get go. Like there's something else going on there, and I saw some articles written about it. How like this guy's background is like in finance. And so
he's just an opportunist.
Yeah, so I think he has a history of doing like what I guess would be called like pump and dump schemes or something like that, where like it's basically just about like manipulating stock values and stuff like that. Not necessarily like legitimate business.
Yeah, but he
growth.
actually like crashed the the pharmaceutical stocks because of this. This is what I heard.
Maybe. Well, and maybe that was by design. I don't know. There was something weird and fishy going on about the whole thing, but what still remains what I take away from this is one, that of course capitalism gets blamed when really fundamentally what he's doing is buying some sort of government license or permit, whether it's like the patent or whatever. So it's really not to blame.
Not just a license or permit, but monopoly.
Well, exactly, and that's the point. And once you do have an actual capitalistic free market thing coming in, like a competitor with a generic that sells it for way cheaper,
and nobody's they're
never going to acknowledge that
they're not
capitalism
like
has actually solved the problem. So it gets blamed for the problem when it has no responsibility and will get no credit for solving the problem that it didn't create. And that's going to be completely overlooked. And this is a big thing. This has been a big story in like the leftist liberal media because they think that this supports their narrative of evil big business.
Right. But this new drug is not going to be a big story.
Well, I guarantee you the whole thing is just going to get completely dropped from all those media outlets
as fast
as possible because it's too obvious that, wait a second, the free market actually worked here. We can't talk about that.
Well,
it's not like
a couple weeks ago, the Darafrim dude was all over. Everybody had an article about it. But this new drug, like I saw like 2-bit articles about it, and on websites that I had never heard of before. It was basically like it didn't get nearly as much exposure.
Of course not, because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually used this opportunity to talk to like a pretty liberal friend who likes to describe himself as left about it. And I'm like, well, did you hear about that? The Darafrim guy. I told him about the new drug for $1, and it's like capitalism, right? Just fucking with him. And then he's like, I hate capitalism. I'm like, well, why? This capitalism brings you the dollar version of this drug that this guy was gouging you for $750. And he's like,
wait, does your friend have AIDS?
No.
Oh.
No, I mean, but I just brought it up to him as a topic of conversation, because I know he sways to the left, and I just wanted to hear what he thought about this.
He swings to the left.
He sways to the left. So. And he's just like, I hate capitalism. I'm okay. So, well, this is capitalism. This is market competition, lowering the price of that drug. You don't like that? And he didn't have any response.
So it was actually cheaper than when it first started out, right? Because
So
you
it
said
sounds-
it first started out, I
at
believe, at like
$12, right?
yeah, $13.50. I
$13.
thought.
Well, and let's not forget that it was kind of capitalism that brought this drug into existence in the first place. So,
Yeah,
Well,
with some
I mean-
government mandate too.
Well, I mean,
Although I think it was initially funded by the government,
like
if I remember reading
could
correctly.
be.
I don't know. I mean, I think drugs still could be created outside of capitalism. I do think things.
Sure.
Things could be created in socialism. You could have advances.
Yeah, I mean,
just
the
think you're
roads
gonna have,
do exist. They are paved.
I just feel like you're gonna have more advances when you have incentives.
Well, no shit.
Yeah, I mean, like
Well, you're gonna
that's all
have
that I'm saying.
advances that actually meet the needs of the people, as opposed to just like what a group of bureaucrats decides that everybody should have.
Well, I mean,
that's
those
very
advances
true.
are going to cater to the needs of the people, because people want the other people's money,
Right.
And I was talking to the same friend, and he's talking about like capitalism, and it shouldn't be for healthcare, it shouldn't be for sick people for making a profit. And it's like, I mean, what are you going to pay doctors McDonald's wages? You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to pay doctors? Like, who sets the price? And I mean, it really sucks too, because I feel like when you argue these things with people, you got to remember, first off, the healthcare system was fucked before Obamacare. It was totally fucked, and that's why we would go to such an extreme as Obamacare. But it really isn't that extreme. It really just took the current system and then forced people to buy from these companies, and essentially made it worse. You gave them guaranteed customers, and it also drove up the prices. I honestly think like if we were to go to single payer, it would be better than Obamacare.
Oh yeah, it definitely would. It would just
like
I think you'd see a
100%
decline
believe
in
that.
quality.
At the same time, I'm not endorsing single payer.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the best thing is to relieve all regulations off healthcare. You could create cheap hospitals. I mean, there are like a number of ways. You could just ship in doctors from other countries. You could have like a cheap budget, like fucking McDonald's fast food hospital. And then other hospitals. I mean, it might not be the best hospital, but they're probably not going to stay afloat if they're not any good at all. I mean, it's basically if you lift all these regulations, you're going to have more competition and better products, and services. But right now, like if you want to open up like a hospital in some states, you have to get approved by a board of hospitals.
Oh yeah.
Now, why are
The
those
regulation
hospitals
is
gonna
insane.
approve competition? And it's like
there's places I don't know how the whole scheme works, but like the to build a new hospital, and there have been places where they're trying to build a hospital and they get shut down because they have to like prove a need to the community, which is just absolutely insane.
Which is
and
ridiculous.
Exactly.
It's just
Especially when you
it's
have
just a
these,
backdoor way for the cronyism to shut out competition.
especially when you have these
obviously.
overrun like downtown. Like I have a friend that's a nurse, and like she's always just complaining about how overrun the hospital is.
which hospital?
I think it's Mercy, maybe.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
a big
and
one.
Mercy has a pretty good reputation too. And
Yeah.
your friends complaining about it's overrun. And actually, before you even said any of this, I was going to actually ask both of you guys, who doesn't know somebody who works at a hospital that complains about like, being short-staffed, that complains about like, oh, it's just like chaos, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and they all hate Obamacare too.
Yeah, and then, dude, in Maryland's one of those states where you have to get approved by a board. So, if you really need that many more, why don't you just let a hospital come in? Why do you have to get approved by a board? Why do we have these hindrances on the market?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's big money.
I think you could dream up all sorts of ways to, free marketly make hospitals, more inexpensive. And, that's what true capitalism is when it's not hindered by regulations.
I heard this story a little while ago, and it's just anecdotal. I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but fundamentally the premise was there's this doctor somewhere in the country, I can't remember where, who came up with this plan that operated a little bit like an insurance model, and that what he was doing was he didn't take insurance or anything like that. What he had was basically like a subscription service where you paid like $80 a month or something. And for all the services he offered, he was just a general practitioner, so it's not like he could do everything and anything. But for anything that a general practitioner can do, you had unlimited access to his, to his services, as long as you're, subscribed.
Yeah.
And so
he got shut down.
Yeah, he got shut down because the regulators said, well, the way you're operating is basically like an insurance company, and so you would have to be like
you
registered
have to get a fucking
and
license to do that.
as an insurance company, which is a totally different thing from being a doctor.
Yeah, and
so he got shut
to
down.
be licensed as an insurance company, you have to jump through like all these hoops yet again. It's just
of course.
Another hindrance
and so
of,
here's the complete insanity.
quote unquote capitalism.
Yeah, and it's just absolutely insane. And so my understanding was he was in some, part of the country where there were lots of people that were, at or below the poverty line. So this was a service that they really wanted and needed. They couldn't afford regular insurance. Of course, the government bureaucrat, I guess, would say, oh, well, then you should just be on Medicare. And then you'd end up in these overcrowded hospitals, getting terrible service and frustrating everybody else in the system, wasting resources. So, I mean, the idea that people point at and blame free market capitalism when it's anything but is just, it just gets so frustrating.
Yeah, like people like to always say like unchecked capitalism, and it's like with fucking Darafrim, that's a government granted monopoly. That is checked capitalism is the problem. It's the opposite of what they're saying.
Unchecked government is what it is.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think it's checked government. I mean, everybody where do these monopoly rights come from? It's, corporations have lobbied to extend monopolies on products. A corporation can hold like a patent longer than a human being. So I mean, it's checked capitalism. The government is working for the people.
No, I said checked government, not.
Well, yeah. I mean, the government is it's working for somebody. It's working for the people that lobby these politicians to create these laws. It's just sadly not working for the people.
That's why I always find it hilarious. Something you might hear from like a constitutionalist or something is like, oh, well, I mean, any walk of life, they'll say, oh, we just need to fix government. Make it work properly. Like, no, I'm sorry. The government is working perfectly. It is working exactly as designed and planned by the people that are manipulating it. It's not like the system is broken. This is the system. That's what it's supposed to do. And I wish more people would understand that. But I think when you look at things like healthcare, I mean, how could you not recognize and accept that fact? Like, they're doing demonstrably damaging things with people's healthcare of all things. Like, that's fundamental to their bodily integrity. And here's these people out here violating it, and it boggles the mind how people can't understand what's really going on here. That this is all just cronyism. This is basically a bunch of fucking criminals pulling the strings.
You
just don't want to admit it.
In that same conversation with my buddy, one of the other things I said to him was like, we were talking about politics and stuff, and he was talking about Bernie Sanders. And, I mentioned, how the Democratic Party is obviously pushing for Hillary. Hillary's the chosen candidate. He agreed, and he said he'd be surprised if they ever let Bernie Sanders go the full way. He thinks they're going to do everything in his power to stop them, to stop
Probably.
Bernie. And what was that?
Probably.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, Hillary was supposed to be the nominee back in 2008. She was sort of the establishment candidate until she wasn't.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the thing is, I mean, I think Bernie Sanders, like him or not, he pisses off the status quo too much. You know what I mean? He's not going to uphold what they've been doing as much as.
Yeah, I don't think Obama was really saying anything that was very anti-status quo aside from like positioning himself as the peace candidate, which wasn't really against the status quo because that was like the trend at the time. Was like, all right, Bush got us into this war. Everyone hates war. Okay, here comes Barack Obama. He appears different from Bush, so in that sense, he's different than the current status quo. But really, he's not going to do anything that's like that outside the lines. Whereas, I mean, I do believe that Bernie is genuinely planning on doing what he wants to do. I don't agree with most of it. But
well, to the extent that they allow him to win the nomination will be the extent that he capitulates to the demands and wishes of the establishment.
Yeah.
And I think, you could even look at Obama. I think he's definitely an ideologue to some extent, but at the end of the day, he's really just, another establishment hack. I don't know. But I find it interesting that he recognizes that the system is so fucked that, he doesn't ultimately have a say, and it's all controlled by the fucking establishment, even within the Democrat Party, and yet he's still gonna vote for them.
Yeah.
This is why it's important to have principles.
Okay, so why is it important to have principles?
Well, because otherwise you get swayed, and this is my problem with a lot of the left libertarians you see. There are actual left libertarians out there that are endorsing Bernie Sanders for president, for example, which I think is absolutely insane. I understand to some extent where they're coming from insofar as it being the lesser of two evils or whatever.
Well, I think it's actually more than that, though. I think they see someone that is that they believe is in opposition to the system, and so to them that automatically qualifies him as not necessarily libertarian, but someone that we ought to support.
They see him
Well,
as
I think he even describes himself as libertarian-ish, doesn't he, on some things?
Who, Bernie?
Yeah. I
don't know if I've ever heard him say those words.
That would be a contradiction of terms for sure. He's definitely called himself a socialist before, and I don't really know how much more
it's
antithetical you can get.
Yeah.
But as far as the left libertarians are concerned, I get the anti-establishment thing, but I think that's just really naive. I mean, how many times have we seen that before?
Well, yeah, like Che Guevara was anti-establishment, but he also was a murderer and
exactly
a socialist dictator.
Exactly, and so I don't think it's enough to just look at these certain things. And I get that there are certain policies that they would agree with, and maybe they're pet policies. Like maybe they're really into Black Lives Matter or something, and so he's one candidate that's been openly in support of a Black Lives Matter, and without making a judgment call about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not passing a judgment about that. But I find it problematic when people let these certain pet issues influence what really ought to be a far more philosophically grounded position. Otherwise, you end up with crazy shit like libertarians voting in support of a socialist. I mean, that's just completely batshit crazy, because fundamentally at its core, the problem is they're voting for the lesser of two evils by looking at a broken clock that's right twice a day.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
and just because this clock is right twice a day, whereas the other clock happens to go in a 24-hour cycle, and so it's only right once a day, is inconsequential, or at least tertiary to the fact that it's a fucking broken clock, and you're never going to get anything good out of that. And this is where I think the libertarian brutalism and whatever has a lot of legitimacy, because it stresses the importance on the fundamental issue, which is basically the non-aggression principle. And if any sort of a socialist of any flavor, whether it's a democratic socialist, they are fundamentally opposed to the non-aggression principle. So to me, that's just a non-starter.
Yeah. Can you define what libertarian brutalism is?
So libertarian brutalism is basically sometimes it's called thin versus thick libertarianism. It was sort of the term was originally coined by Jeffrey Tucker in an article maybe like a year or two ago, where I think he coined the term libertarian brutalism, and it's actually
was it as an epithet?
Well, no, not necessarily. It's not a reference to brutality. It's reference to an actual.
Hey, Jared, can you put your phone on silent? I'm sorry, Ethan. Jared, you think you could do that, dude?
You think you can fuck off?
Dude, seriously, man. What is it?
So
that was so rude.
So the reference is not to brutality, it's to a certain type of architecture called brutalism, which one of the aspects of this type of architecture is like a 20th century thing.
Oh, okay.
Was being very stripped down and minimalist and all about purely function and not aesthetic. Like the aesthetic appeal of it was that it was nothing but functional, I guess you could say. And so basically the essence is that just focusing on basically the non-aggression principle is fundamentally the only thing that matters. That is the only litmus test that really matters philosophically. There are plenty of things that are aesthetic beyond that, but they're in a totally different realm of the actual principle of the non-aggression principle.
Right.
And so
it's anti-pragmatist. In that sense.
It's very,
because I think that's the approach that a lot of these left libertarians are taking with Bernie Sanders.
Yes,
is that maybe they understand that he is a socialist and that ultimately his ideology is wrong, but they see it as just a practical way to address current issues.
Well, I mean, okay. Well,
yeah,
who is-
exactly. And what I'm saying is, and what sort of the brutalism I think would say is that that's really dangerous, because fundamentally the only thing that really matters is the non-aggression principle. And so as soon as you start violating that,
Yeah.
everything else that follows, is just a broken clock that maybe it gets right about one or two. Maybe it's right about certain policies,
And it might
or certain
fix things
positions,
in the
but
short term, but in the long term,
yeah, it's
if your underlying foundation isn't in order, you're ultimately going to have more problems emerge. Then you're just going to have to slap on more pragmatic band-aids instead of just addressing the root issue.
yeah, and one useful way I heard this described. I think this is something that comes from Molyneux, where he sort of makes the analogy that, for example, something like philosophy and law could maybe sort of be looked at as like science and engineering, where science is sort of what is, and then the engineering is what do you do with that.
Yeah, practical application of it.
Yeah, and so, but fundamentally, you can't have engineering without the science behind it.
Sure.
Science doesn't say how strong you should build a bridge. It just says the gravity is going to act on that bridge in certain ways, or whatever. And then from the engineering, then you make decisions about, well, okay, how big should it be? How strong should it be? Whatever. Mm-hmm. But you can't. But those things that go back to the philosophy, the science, they're inviolable. That's why it's philosophy and not just some aesthetic preference or something.
Yeah.
And so anytime you ignore the fact that, anytime you go to engineer a bridge and you don't take it into, gravity into account, you're going to build a bad bridge. And so regardless of how you think this bridge should be built or whatever, you have to keep that fundamental premise, the philosophy, the science of it. Objective reality has to be a part of the equation. And beyond that, I mean, it just seems just downright just gullible to really think that a socialist is going to be an honest politician. I mean, I think that's gullible. I guess that's just an opinion.
I mean, wouldn't it be gullible to think that anybody would be an honest politician? I don't know.
I agree, and that's why that's why I am an anarchist, and that's why I don't.
Well,
vote.
I don't know about politician, but elected politician. I don't think you could become an elected politician and be honest.
Well, I mean, I'll say, like, what do you think about Ron Paul? Do you think he was honest?
he was elected.
He was elected,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I was more thinking presidentially.
I mean, it's a, well, I mean, he ran for the president. I think it's going to be really hard, because I do think there's going to be less barriers to getting into something like a congressman,
right.
to getting a Congress post, or to becoming a senator. Or especially local politics, possibly even less so. But at the same time, I'd also say that I'm sure there's a lot of local posts where there are going to be barriers, where you do have to be, financed from somebody. You do have to, tote the status quo. But I'd say, the higher you go up in politics, the more important that is. The more money there is involved, and the more people there are that are going to try to keep you out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like. I mean, it, in my mind, it's more than just an analogy. It's literally the case. But you can think of it as an analogy of infiltrating the mob and making it peaceful or something. Well, that's not the definition of the mob. So,
what do you think about? I know you like to yank on Chris Cantwell's belt loop a lot, like follow him around and stuff. But that's what do you think about, like,
a pejorative way of putting
it? What do you think about what do you think about, like, Cantwell? How he changed his position? It's like now he's okay with voting, right?
I don't personally, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I'm not one of those hardline people that say voting is aggression, no ifs, ands, or buts. I think that, there is a case to be made that if you are voting for legitimately less government, I can see where they're coming from. As a strategy thing, I'm in everybody do whatever you want kind of guy.
So what is your objection? Is it moral
to voting?
Yeah.
I just think it's completely useless, and I don't want to do anything that makes them feel more justified by giving them my vote.
Well, there's also the whole argument.
Ultimately, I just think it's useless. And to be honest, I'm one of those people where I'm sort of torn between, well, do I want a conservative Republican in there that'll at least maybe slow down the rate of growth ever so slightly, or there's a big part of me that kind of wants somebody like Bernie Sanders to win, just so the collapse will come that much sooner.
But, well, I mean, do Republicans really slow down the rate of growth?
Well, fundamentally, no, they don't really, and hence again why I say that ultimately it doesn't really matter, and so I just don't.
But you do
don't
make a good
care.
point about voting for somebody like Bernie Sanders, who
Sanders.
know-
It's not
Barney
Barney
Sanders, dude.
Sanders.
Barney
Yeah,
Sanders.
I slipped into the meme. What was I saying? Yeah, I think what you said about voting for Bernie Sanders. Yeah, I mean that might be a good strategy to vote for whoever you think will grow government the quickest. That way, we can get to the point where it finally just the Leviathan just collapses in on itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our best bet. I mean, it seems pretty inevitable that's what's going to happen at some point. It's a matter of when, not if. I think, and if it happens real suddenly and quickly, I think there's a better chance of it not being co-opted so easily by the the interests that are already at play, if you will.
Well,
I don't really know what's going to be best in me as an individual. I'm never going to affect it, so I just don't worry about it, and I don't care. I can see the advantages of either way. Well, it would be nice if tax rates went slightly down or if the economy grew slightly. But at the same time, I kind of want it to just all come to a fucking end right now. So I don't know. I don't really care. Nothing I'm going to do is going to change it.
Well, I mean, like, I was a principled non-voter from, really from the time I was like 16, which I couldn't even vote. But right then, I came from the right, and then like I just realized that, no matter who gets elected, shit doesn't really change that much. Republicans pull to the. Republicans pull a little bit to the right. Democrats pull a little bit to the left. They generally
spending
meet in the
increases
middle.
faster under Republicans, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. But
yeah, I mean,
It's
like
mostly military spending, right?
I just realized, there's the politicians. 95% of them are crooks. So I mean, it makes more sense not to vote. If you're dumb enough to vote, you're fucking dumb enough to believe them. To quote propaganda. So I was principled non-voter, but. And then in my early 20s, I got into like the Libertarian Party, and I figured if those guys are going to take the time to run, I'll take the time to go out and vote for them. And then when Ron Paul came along, it's like, what the fuck, are Republicans saying this? And he's been a senator for 30 years,
He's a representative.
I'm sorry, yeah, not a senator, a congressman. I'm sorry. So Little Blaze. So it was like I was just my mind was blown. It was like amazing. This like 80-year-old Republican, or I guess he was in his 70s then, but and there's the other argument. There's like the Walter Block argument, or you can say Rothbard. He would even I think Rothbard even like fucking endorsed like Newt Gingrich, which
It's possible.
Yeah, and like Walter Block looks at it like, if somebody's going to rob you less, maybe.
Wait, that was Walter Block? I thought you said that was what's his name, the IP guy. Last week you said it was the other dude,
Kinsella?
like Stephen
Kinsella.
Kinsella.
Yeah, you said Kinsella said that.
Oh,
Yeah,
he has that hilarious quote.
well-
There's lots of memes about lower my goddamn taxes. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
Well, yeah, actually, Kinsella has rationalized this way too, and I was going to get to that, but yeah, like Walter Block, amongst others have said it. If somebody's going to rob you less, maybe you have an interest in voting for that guy.
Yeah, but that's all things. Like I said last week, like that's all other things equal. If he's going to rob you less, but he's also going to start more wars and cause more death and destruction around the world, that might weigh against you saving like $10 a month.
Well, yeah, I mean, people are always gonna like cherry pick their issues, and of course, I mean, you can vote or not vote, whatever. I don't give a shit. I don't think it should be mandatory. But I do think I look at it like this. If 99% of the people went the way of Ethan and stopped voting, those other 10% of the people would probably would still be voting and then making decisions for us. So maybe if we could tap into that apathetic, like 40% or whatever it is of people that don't vote, and get them to like more interested in like these issues, like just talking like this with your friends, maybe we could get better candidates. I mean, there is positive change to be made, man. Like fucking, you look at marijuana prohibition, man. Like I didn't think it was ever going to be legal. It's because like when I think about it, I'm like, man, it's so retarded that pot's illegal. But, and then I think, well, hippies in the 60s had to have been thinking the same fucking thing. And there's so many of them. And they had to be thinking, oh, it'll be legal any day now. This is absurd. But, I mean, how long did it take? But, I mean, it's happened.
Do you think that had anything to do with the voters, though?
I think it had everything to do with the fucking internet, man. I think it had everything to do with people talking to people like we're talking to people right now, man. Because I'll tell you what, like,
don't you think that's more effective than voting?
Yeah, I'm not saying you have to pick one or the other. Fucking do both. I mean, voting is something.
Yeah, no, I think those are all legitimate arguments, and I don't disagree with any of them, and I don't begrudge anybody that votes.
Dude, okay, that's why you need to vote Trump, bro. No, I'm just fucking with you.
But fundamentally, I think you have to realize at the end of the day, philosophically, these things are not consistent. That's why it's never really going to work. It's never going to ultimately help much. I think the only reason why pot is legalized is because there's too much money in it.
I mean,
it's not because they said, well, the people finally feel strongly enough about
how
this.
consistent are you? How consistent can you be?
What do you mean?
I mean,
it's not that hard to be consistent with the non-aggression principle.
I don't know. I mean,
that's the point. That's
I don't know. I mean,
beyond that, I mean, I think whether you want to vote or not, I think is just sort of an aesthetic preference ultimately.
No. What I'm just saying is how consistent can you be? Like when you go out shopping for clothes or when you go out shopping for cars, do you take the time to research if like those companies are contributing to politicians that you don't like?
No, of course not.
Because yeah, I mean, I'm saying, but I mean, how consistent can you be? And I mean, I think once again, it's like is it 100% libertarian to vote? Of course, I mean, I don't think it is. To me, in my mind, and of course, it's all relative. Because if you ask 100 people what libertarian means, you're gonna get probably 100 different responses. Even if they're just a little bit different, varying. Some people might not even know what it means, but I feel like voting is something you can do. And once again, if 10 people go up and vote, it's like they're making those decisions for everybody else. And there's the other end of that too. Like what elections ever have been decided by one person. So that's how a lot of people like look at it from like that like individual perspective. Like if I go out and vote for president, it's not going to be like whatever candidate that I like the least isn't going to lose by one vote, so it's really not that important. I don't have to go out and go. Like a lot of people look at it like that.
Well, yeah, it's a weird thing where there's like, it's the whole like how many pieces of sand before you have like a beach. You know what I mean? Like, in order to really make a difference voting wise, you would have to influence a large amount of people to vote the way that you want to vote.
Well, I mean,
like you can't do it just as an individual in a vacuum. Like you'd have to get on this podcast every day and say like you need to vote for Rand Paul or whoever, and then perhaps you would then influence 100 people to vote with you. Well, I mean 100 isn't enough, but whatever amount you need to actually make a noticeable difference. So it's not even just enough to vote. You also have to ensure that other people will vote in block with you.
You're saying you got to campaign for them too,
right?
Well, at which point I think you can more clearly or more objectively say that your time will be a hell of a lot better spent doing something else.
Yeah.
Like say talk about the non-aggression principle.
I mean, I'm like,
but that's just my opinion,
right? I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't argue that it's like anti-libertarian to vote. I would just say it's a waste of time.
Well, I think it is anti-purist libertarian because I mean, because the way I look at it, like libertarianism in its purest form is anarchy.
But I mean, to be a pure libertarian, you'd have to live in a fucking
exactly.
house
That's what
in
I'm saying.
Montana.
I'm not saying
off
I'm not
of
saying I
government
am
land.
pure, dude.
Well, see, this
motherfucker's tainted.
Here's the thing. Here's why the morality doesn't apply, and it's because it's the same thing as like when somebody that's the hostage of a criminal, is not morally responsible for the things that they do in for the purposes of getting out of harm's way. When somebody has
self-sustaining.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just all self-defense, and the moral component is then on the person that's holding the gun to your head, so to speak.
And in reality, though, you are responsible to pay your fucking taxes, and if you don't, men with guns are going to come after you.
That's what he's saying.
That's what the one I'm saying is that the men with guns are responsible. The moral component of you voting or not voting, there is no particular moral component to that, as far as the voter is concerned. because there's a gun to their head. And so that's why, like, yeah, you can vote for the lesser of two evils, even though he's going to do one bad thing for two good things that he does. But ultimately, the voter has no responsibility to that because they're a hostage in this situation, which shifts any moral responsibility to the hostage taker, which is the state in this case.
And, you know,
I think it's
particularly
largely irrelevant. Now, I will say, just to draw one perhaps distinction, is that which is principled and that which is unprincipled. I.e., if you're voting for a legitimate minarchist, like let's say you're a Rand Paul kind of guy because he's flawed, but he'll be a hell of a lot better than any of the other guys. I can get that, and I think that's just a pragmatic utilitarian thing. You know, I still think you're wasting your time by even driving to the polling, you know, station, but whatever. Versus, you know, voting for an out-and-out socialist because he's going to rob your neighbor more. I think, you know, maybe that's a distinction we can draw as to where it starts to become problematic. But ultimately, I mean, whether you don't vote or you try to vote for the lesser of two evils, i.e. the smaller, you know, what you think will result in a smaller government, it doesn't really matter, and there's no real moral component to it because you have a gun to your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's the same goes with paying taxes and driving on government roads and, you know, sending your kids to public school.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in a hostage situation. You have to do what you can to make the best of it. But at the same time, you shouldn't do anything to make it worse. Like, you shouldn't go out and rob people. You shouldn't go out and vote for somebody that you know is going to, for sure, increase taxes and for sure start more wars and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the comparison I like to make, which is particularly inflammatory to a lot of people, but I still think is absolutely true and unassailable, irrefutable, is how could you possibly complain that a slave is eating the slave master's food when that's the only choice he's been given? It's like either that or starve. It's like, oh, well, you drive on the roads. It's like, well, what fucking choice do I have?
Yeah, I don't have a fucking
you
jetpack.
already forced me to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's what I also find ridiculous. People say, oh, you got to pay your taxes to pay on your roads. It's like, well, I already paid my taxes and the roads are already there. So what the hell am I paying for this time around? You know?
Yeah.
That's just one thing that always gets my goat. But so it's and that's why I think it's very problematic for these left libertarians to come out on these, you know, saying like Bernie Sanders is great because he's one or two policy issues I happen to agree with him with.
Now,
he's a broken clock, and philosophically, you're talking about voting for a larger state with more theft, more violence.
Exactly. Like when I was
that's
talking,
pretty reprehensible, I think.
Yeah, like the other day when I was telling you guys about talking to my buddy who, like, you know, leans to the left. You know, that's another thing I brought up. I'm like, you know, Bernie Sanders wants to grow the government and give the government all this new power. And you're cool with the government having all this new power because, you know, Bernie Sanders is at the helm. But, you know, I asked the dude, like, you know, well, what happens in, like, you know, 4 or 8 years when, you know, like it always does, the power shifts to the Republicans? Do you want the Republicans to have all this power? And, you know, he said no. It was like I was blowing his mind.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's like the Democrats love government as long as they're in control of the government. But they never want to admit that there will be that lapse in time. No matter how good of a candidate you put up, it's always going to go. Like, what was the longest period of time that we had one party in power?
Oh, probably at least a couple decades. I mean, fuck, FDR himself was in there for like 16 years, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
12.
But that was before term limits.
Oh, well, like 3 terms and a fraction or whatever. But
yeah, well, but nowadays though, that's not really how it works. I mean, you have because shit just keeps getting worse and worse, and so whoever's in power gets blamed to a degree, and then so the pendulum swings back to the other direction.
Yeah, well, it's just like Lord of the Rings. Typically. It's the exact same thing. It's like, you know, the problem isn't who's wielding the ring. The problem is having a ring in the first place, and that's why, again, the libertarian brutalism.
You don't think Ron Paul was like a Frodo? You don't think Ron Paul was like a Frodo, so to speak?
I don't know if the analogy works that far.
I think it does, dude. Because I think like if you were to trust,
like,
anybody,
Rothbard would be Gandalf.
If you would trust anybody to hold the ring, wouldn't it be Ron?
Yeah.
Or rather, but are you also supposing that had he gotten elected, he would have tossed it into into Mordor or whatever?
I think had Ron Paul get elected, it's basically like it seems like any president who's elected, they're never. It's typically a Republican and there's a Democratic Congress, or vice versa. It seems like they never really get that much done. The interesting thing about Ron Paul, which is I think like the best thing even about his campaign was, if Ron Paul was president, you would have like the coolest speeches ever on like, television. You would have he would be just introducing more of these ideas day in and day out, and people would listen more because he would be president. You know what I mean? I think that would who made more anarchists than fucking Ron Paul?
Well, and that I was about to say that's a hilarious meme I've seen going around where I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically the premise is like, oh, Ron Paul created all these libertarians. By the time Rand Paul came around, they were all anarchists.
Exactly.
So,
they won't vote
what's
for
the
him
difference between an minarchist and an anarchist? About 6 months. I don't remember where I was going with that. But.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally relevant, So,
but it would be fantastic, but it's never going to happen.
I mean,
I don't think there was
like,
any
I'm
chance of Ron Paul getting elected. I think he knew that, and I think he just wanted to use it as a platform to do what he did. And I think mission accomplished.
Oh yeah, yeah. And dude, he fucking spreaded the message, dude.
Yeah.
And it's whether there's no chance then, it doesn't mean there's gonna be no chance in the future. And I'm a big fan of the idea, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't. Either way, you're probably right. So, and if you talk like you can't and you act like you can't, you're definitely not going to. The only way we are going to make things better
is
get
a Ron Paul and the president, in the White House. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, dude, let's work with what we have, And if people are willing to try, good people like Ron Paul, Justin Amash, it's like, why not support them?
But it's a matter of you have a finite amount of time and you have a finite amount of resources.
I mean,
so if you're going to spend all that, imagine how much effort and resources it takes to campaign to actually get somebody into the White House.
Well, I mean,
what if that was spent on?
Yeah, I mean, dude, what if it takes 100 years? How many years did you have a fucking chain slavery before that ended? Should people have just given up? Like, oh, this is never.
Yeah, but we're trying to end the state. We're not trying to get
it's fucking slavery, dude. Whether it's soft slavery or whatever. I mean, it's basically you gotta keep going for it, man.
Right, but I'm saying go for it in a better way that's going to bring about the end of the state.
Okay, what better way? Who brought forth more anarchists than Ron Paul?
Dude, I'm not even arguing. I'm not arguing against Ron Paul.
No,
I already conceded. I already said, like, yes, what he did, but he wasn't trying to get elected per se. I mean, on the surface, he was trying to get elected, but what he was really doing was using the presidential run as a podium to preach libertarianism and the non-aggression principle. I think, we should encourage more people to do that. I don't think our goal should be to get them into the White House because I don't think that is even possible. I think I think the system is so rigged that if it even fucking came close, like someone would assassinate him. Like I think it's that fucking the deck is that stacked.
Well,
maybe that's I'm anti-conspiracy, but I would go as far as to say that that's probably a likelihood.
Well, okay. Well, 10 years ago, dude. I mean, you would say the deck is that stacked for not ending the drug war. Nobody thought the fucking pot was ever going to be legal.
Well, you never did. That doesn't mean that everybody thought that.
No, I thought it would eventually be illegal.
Once I realized I'm sure hippies in the 60s thought that too. And how long did it fucking take, dude?
Right. And
how long did it fucking take? But
dude, that's not because we had a politician get into office.
It's not, dude. It's not. It's from word of mouth to different people talking to their friends. I think it's largely in part to the internet and Facebook and fucking even Facebook memes.
Right. And let me briefly go back to voting. I think voting can be practical if it's on ballot initiatives. I think voting for like legalizing marijuana on the ballot is a good use of your time. As long as you, like I said before, as long as you can also try and get more people to vote for it.
Like, I mean, dude,
but those actually make differences.
How long does it take to vote? How long does it take to vote? And a lot of people are typically given the day off, or a lot of people's employers.
I've never had the day off.
I never have either, but I could tell you, like, my employer would probably work something out to if I was going to vote, or if it took longer than my lunch break or whatever, they probably would waive it. It's most people are going to kind of like You know, I've definitely worked for people that where it's like, you know, you got to work a double that day. Well, yeah, you can leave to go vote. You know, leave during this time. You know,
Yeah.
It's basically how hard is it to vote? Really? I mean, is it everything that you can do? No. Yeah, I mean, but is it something you can do? I'd say sure.
Well, I think that ultimately, like I said earlier, I think it's useless because I think there is a critical mass at which, you know, once socialism and welfare in a democratic state reaches a certain point, then inevitably, I mean, if you can vote for other people's shit and you get enough people whose income comes from other people's shit, there's a critical mass at which it's sort of the point of no return. I think we're well past that.
Was it useless for those people in Senate who voted to make Ron Paul their congressman? Was it useless for them? Was it useless for you that they were able to accomplish that through voting?
That is a fair point. I mean, had he not been congressman, he might not have been able to get the platform that he did for the presidential run.
I mean,
but how often do you have somebody like Ron Paul running for Senate that's in one of the two major parties?
It's because he's like Frodo, dude.
But what
fucking magical, dude?
Fundamentally, what you're talking about is trying to win something through a democratic process, and if over 50% of the people want to enact socialism, you're fucked. So I mean, like, yeah, maybe you'll turn on some other, turn on some people to libertarianism, but you're not going to actually succeed in the democratic process. And I'm not saying there's no value to that. I think that you have to weigh, the opportunity cost of is there something else you could be doing that would be more productive, either for yourself or for liberty or whatever it is. You could campaign for Ron Paul and Rand Paul until you die, and never fundamentally change anything other than maybe change a couple people's minds. Or in the meantime, there's maybe a million other better things you could be doing with your time. And I don't think there's nothing to be achieved with really voting. I don't think that would possibly be worth, the amount of money and time that it takes to run that kind of a campaign. Especially this day and age, I don't see it being worth its time.
I mean, if you're just talking strictly just going to the poll and voting, okay, whatever. I mean, yes, that's not going to take that much of your time. You might even get off of work for an hour to grab a fucking coffee and get a blowjob or something.
Nice.
But
I guess it's important to not conflate voting and campaigning because I think all of us probably campaigned for in some capacity for Ron Paul in 2008, if not 2012 or whatever. And largely it was kind of a waste of time. I mean, I didn't personally turn any friends on that wouldn't have already been open to it to begin with.
I got a bunch of people into it, actually.
Well, you have cooler friends than me.
Yeah, I got a whole group of friends that vote.
Well,
that are now just apathetic, but they voted for Ron Paul.
So I find it interesting that what I think would be really pretty epic is if the nominees were Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. To me, that would be like the most incredibly polar opposite, ideology. Mr. Capitalism and then the socialist, and yet both will be viewed as the anti-establishment candidates.
Do you really?
And at the same time, we all know that neither of them are legitimately anti-establishment.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Trump is incredibly left. I mean, he's been on video, over 10 years ago, saying he's more of a Democrat than a Republican.
Yeah, well, I think he's just an opportunist. I don't necessarily trust anything that he says. I think he's he's trying to be a politician. They're by definition opportunists. So I don't trust a goddamn thing that comes out of his mouth, but to the extent that he raises a middle finger to the establishment, including, if not especially, the media, that to me, that does give me a little bit of a chubby, is seeing him just talk complete shit about the media and just making fun of them. And I love the fact that he, basically calls people names or whatever. I mean, not that doesn't make an argument. But he does make a legitimate argument. He does make his case, and the media. I mean, I hate the left as much as anybody. I'm definitely one of those people that came to libertarianism from the right, and so seeing him raise his middle finger to those people and doing so on a large national stage, that's something I can get behind. I think that's more effective than voting. And in particular, when you see that is, and I guess it's particularly pleasing to me because that is the left's tactic, is shame. People always say, how would ostracism work in an anarchist society? It's like, well, that's been the tactic of the left, for the last 100 years is, let me look up critical theory. But, that's the whole thing, is they're just shaming people into going along with them. Just like the feminist. Did we talk about that yet? The feminist that was...
No.
Maybe we can talk about that next. But that's just the thing. They shame people into, agreeing with them, whether they actually agree or not. And so for Trump to basically throw the same exact thing, 10 times as hard back in their face, that makes me happy.
I mean, like, I get upset when people try to give Trump so much credit. Everybody's like, yeah, Trump, he's saying what you think. Well, not everybody, but everybody's like, Trump's saying what everybody is thinking, It's like, yeah, if you're a racist, It's,
well, surely you're not saying that, opposing illegal immigrants is inherently racist.
Well, I mean,
what he specifically said
like,
about...
He talks about them all as if they're, like, fucking rapists and shit. And,
he's pointed out that there's a higher rate of criminality, and so far as I understand, there is. That doesn't make it relevant or worth talking about. But I don't think that's inherently racist to point out that.
Well, I think that's just due to poverty. I think that's more of a.
And
it's not necessarily they're. It's not because they are Mexican, therefore they are more likely to be criminals.
I'm not aware. I don't follow these things. Like I said, I don't vote. I don't particularly follow these things.
Yeah, well,
but I don't think he's ever said.
I think
that
it's funny. It's funny that you're.
Well, he was like the Mexicans are sending over their worst people, as if like the government is just like sending these people over as like Trojan horses or some shit.
No, they're fleeing the chaos of the drug war, which America is responsible for, creating that demand
Has Trump
for Mexican
said anything about the
brickweed.
drug war? He has to have been asked about that at some point. Has he made any comments?
I'm not sure
Did
about
he
that.
I haven't heard anything about that. I'd be curious to hear what he has to say.
One of the candidates said, I think that was Christie. Yeah, that was Christie who was saying he would repeal. He would go, like, if he was elected, he would enforce the federal drug laws.
Oh, like he would
go into Colorado and shut down all the shit.
Coming from a fat guy who's probably has to take insulin.
Well, yeah, we had our
shit.
podcast was titled "Chris Christie is a fat fucking hypocrite."
That's very apt. That's very apt.
Yeah.
But I think I read a headline about Ben Carson came out saying that he would strengthen the drug war, some insanity.
Yeah, actually, I saw a video.
I haven't seen anything about Trump on the drug war. That seems kind of conspicuously absent from any headlines.
I actually saw a video of Carson from 2013, where before he announced that he was going to be in the running for the election, where he actually endorsed Rand Paul as his candidate for 2015. I thought that was pretty. Well, that's interesting. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
He's also come out against gun rights.
Carson.
I think it was like right after Sandy Hook. He had some comments about like, well, if you're in the city,
exactly.
you don't need
I
to
saw
have
the same
something.
thing.
I was like, what the hell does your geographic location?
Well,
have
it's
to do
basically
with
if you're in the
actual
city,
rights?
you should. If you actually, if you're, it does matter if you're in the city. You should have a gun.
Well, yeah,
in the city.
No, well,
you
I mean,
like
essentially, like people that are for gun rights who aren't like total retards, are really just defending the common man's right to self defense. If you understand, if you understand why it's important to have firearms, it's about self defense.
I enjoy more the pointing out the complete hypocrisy that gun control can only be enforced with guns. So it's just on its face is a completely illogical position. Right. It contradicts itself. Because you sure as hell aren't going to disarm a person with a gun without a gun yourself. So by definition, you're saying we need to point guns at people to make sure that guns aren't pointed at people. That's well, and it's completely insane. It's like, but wait, how can you stop doing the thing by doing the thing?
Right, and it's like they don't want to get rid of guns. They just want to concentrate the supply of guns in the hands of the state.
Yeah, because they feel like they have better control over the guns in the hands of the state.
They have the moral authority.
Well, that too.
I mean, but another thing though, don't you feel as though Carson is, with the exception of Rand Paul, he's the least hawkish on the stage? Like he seems.
I haven't watched any of the debates or anything.
Like he seems to have more of a general opposition to war, and especially not getting them into them as easily. Like he doesn't like that. So and it's one of those things. I'm not endorsing Carson. I'm not saying that I would vote for the guy. It definitely, if it were between like Carson and Bernie or Carson and Hillary, I'd probably vote Libertarian or Vermin Supreme or not. Probably
Vermin Supreme. That's a candidate I could vote for.
Yeah, and I
Free
think
ponies,
I think
dental
it's important to
hygiene.
vote for Vermin
These are the
Supreme.
issues I care about.
See, I think it would be more important to. I mean, I'm not sure if you vote for Vermin Supreme. I'm not sure if he's on the ballot in all 50 states.
We can write him in.
Well, yeah, you can write him in, but the problem with those votes is they're not counted. So I'd rather vote for somebody.
Not?
Yeah, I know. Why not? It's fucked up. But I'd rather vote for somebody.
So what? They're only counted if they reach a certain mass, or they're not counted at all.
Yeah,
They have to be counted. I've heard of people winning via write-in before. It's not like they just fucking throw them in the trash. It might just be they don't count it in the total, like the results, unless they hit like 1% or something like that. Because like they're not gonna put Mickey Mouse on CNN and say like Mickey Mouse received 3 votes. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, you know what I'm saying is, you know, if you could vote like, you know, libertarian for somebody like, you know, Johnson, sure, you know, he's a cool dude. He's got a lot of good things to say. You know, then you know, you're going to be part of that. You know, 1 million people to vote libertarian. It'll get a few headlines. Maybe get people to Google libertarian. You know, I mean, I think
we're getting back to the point where it's like you just have to choose how you want to use your time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you can still vote. You can vote and do other stuff.
Yeah,
Nobody's saying
sure.
you have to quit your job for a year.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're welcome to do that.
It's relatively easy, dude. It's not much harder than brushing your teeth.
Right, but
Well,
I don't think
okay.
it's something to make like a moral stand about per se.
Yeah, I mean, if all you're talking about is, you know, taking 10 minutes out of your day to swing by the local middle school and go into their gym and press a button or something, I mean, you know, go ahead and knock yourself out. It's 10 minutes out of your day. I mean, what the fuck? Who cares? Just don't expect to accomplish anything with it. I mean, I guess every once in a while it happens, but on average,
yeah,
I'm not sure that the time is worth being spent. But
the exception
I don't
being
begrudge
like
people who do.
voting for ballot initiatives, like more specifically
Well,
legalizing
sure.
weed.
But of course, those are going to be a lot more local, and so and this is, I know you brought up Cantwell earlier in regards to this. I don't know where that went. You know, I mean, when you get more local, or when you're talking about things like ballot initiatives, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe there is slightly more chance, and so maybe it's a little more worth your while. You know, I don't know. You have to take it on a case by case basis. But you know, this moral imperative to you must vote obviously is ridiculous.
No, I agree with that. You know, I don't think it should be, or it shouldn't be required of you. You know, but I think it's probably a good idea. It's one thing that you can do. Not necessarily the most important thing. But what were you saying about? You said there was a feminist this week that you thought was really cool.
Well, before I think all feminists are just super cool. Well, there's something else I want to talk about actually that related to the voting thing. Cantwell had it came out with an article, which is really the only way that I had heard about this. But apparently there's an Army Secretary, John McHugh, apparently has some report or testimony where he says that, and I'm quoting here, if your objective is true and pure equality, then you have to look at all aspects of the roles of women in the military, and registration for the draft will be one of those things that will have to be considered. So what this guy is literally saying is that women should be eligible for the draft, which has historically been a male-only thing. And of course, Cantwell went absolutely ballistic about this and went on one of his "we must violently resist the government tirades" over this. I'm not that concerned about it, but it is a great opportunity to throw out there something that a lot of people don't realize, which is the whole suffragette movement. You know, the women's suffrage thing was actually not really about voting. It was fundamentally about the draft, because at that time, and I think is ultimately pretty much the case today, you have to be registered for the draft in order to vote as a male. And so the issue that the women were talking about back in those days was the fact that they weren't about to be eligible for the draft. You know, they weren't about to be drafted or anything, but they still wanted to vote anyway, even though that was a prerequisite. So that's why they weren't able to vote. It was just a misogynist, like, we hate women, we think they're dumb. The premise, the idea was that you shouldn't be able to vote to send somebody else off to fight a war that you yourself would not be subject to.
But then wouldn't that also be an argument against like allowing old people to vote? Because if you're like 60 years old, you're not going to get drafted to go to war.
I would agree, and that's why I don't think anybody should be able to
vote.
I
mean, okay.
But
playing by the rules of the state, no.
Yeah. But that was the argument at that time, and that's what was really going on. It wasn't just we hate women and think they're stupid. That was fundamentally, that was sort of the linchpin of the whole thing.
Right.
But so Chris Cantwell went absolutely ballistic about this, saying, "Oh, women need to be," his typical white knighting thing, like, "Oh, women need to be protected," and blah blah blah.
Wait, Chris Cantwell was white knighting?
Well,
I thought he was usually against.
I'm being pejorative. I mean, I'm just sort of making fun of him, trying to punch up here, but he basically was saying that this is my line in the sand. I absolutely will not tolerate this because women and men are objectively different, and that's why you can't draft women. Which I think is kind of silly because of course you can't draft women, you can't draft men either.
Yeah,
it's
the draft is a moral
atrocious.
period.
Yeah,
the draft is slavery.
And so the reason why I mentioned the whole voting thing in the women's suffrage movement in this context was that I think this is actually potentially a very good thing, because if women are eligible for the draft, you will be guaranteed to never ever see the draft used again in the history of the United States. Because there's no way in hell people are going to vote to enact a draft that women will be subject to, particularly women. And men aren't going to want that either. So I think it potentially, as a purely pragmatic, strategic thing, I think it's.
I mean, are you sure about that?
So,
because I mean, if you look
you should go vote for this, dude.
If you look at like a place like Israel, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You have to serve in the military.
I mean, I think that
fucking Jews.
I mean, it's a different culture for one.
Yeah, sure, it's a different culture.
They didn't have a Vietnam War and that kind of culture. That it still pervades today. They obviously don't have as much problem with trouncing around the Middle East, whereas America used to under Bush have a pretty strong anti-war, movement or whatever.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that would be probably the single. I mean, I can't guarantee anything, but I think that would be the single best possible guarantee that I don't think the U.S. could get away with another draft. Period.
Right.
I think there'd just be too much of a cultural resistance to something like that. But particularly if women are subject to it, and women are now the majority of voters. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they make up the majority of voters now. They're sure as hell not going to vote for anybody that's going to send them off to war.
That's why
Ethan, I think you doubt the powers of statism.
Well, I've been wrong before, and I point to
No, I mean, dude, like, look at it, man. You have like a fucking 9/11 type incident, and fucking all the rules, everything, goes out the door.
Yeah, anything is possible. You're right. We could have.
I think you're right. I think it would make it less likely for at least non-9/11 ish related wars. Like something like Libya might not. Have a draft happen. But
I don't know. This is all hypothetical.
Yeah. So what about your feminist?
I want to hear about this feminist, dude.
So this feminist, this is just beautiful. I guess is Schadenfreude the word?
Yeah.
I just love watching the left eat their own, because like I said earlier, their main tactic is shame, and so when they start shaming each other, I just think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing.
It's just because it's great when the right do it as well, though.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong.
It's a different kind of shame, though. The right shame is more of like a moral shame, as far as like anti-Christian kind of shame.
Like I want to point out, like I came from the right. I was very constitutional. I was very pro freedom, blah blah blah. I mean, I think I was very like inherently libertarian. I came from the right, and then when I got into libertarianism, I think for years even I still kind of had this bent to the right some, but I think like throughout the years, like probably like the last like 6, 8, well actually probably like 10 years, like I don't have any preference as far as the parties. It's like I can't honestly say that Obama might have done a better job than John McCain would have done. You know what I mean?
Well, it depends on how you define a better job.
It totally does, but I mean, it's I don't know, man. I think both sides are really fucking scary, dude.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I can't
we're
really
not
pick a favorite.
But I don't think we're saying necessarily that one side is better or worse than the other. They have their own different tactics of I guess gaining followers and just like putting down their opposition. I mean, like the left will do the shame of, you're racist or you're anti-women,
misogynist, homophobe.
Right.
Whereas the right doesn't do that as much. I'm just saying. Well, I don't hold much partiality to either side when you just talk about like Democrats or Republicans in general. There's a couple Republicans I like.
But yeah, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying
there's a couple Democrats I like too.
Right. We're just saying there's different tactics at each side. They're both equally horrible. It's just they have the different ways of doing what they do.
Well,
but anyway, so go on with the story, man.
Well, just real quick, for one, I'll go on the record. I think this is a quote from like one of the South Park guys. They basically said,
oh yeah,
we hate conservatives, but we really fucking hate liberals.
Yeah,
I'm all about that because fundamentally conservatives, when they talk about classical liberalism, the principles of minarchism, those are principles I agree with. Now, there are disagreements on finer points, like I think the smallest government possible is no government.
You know what I like about that statement? It's a big fuck you to Hollywood. What I like about that statement is it's a big fuck you to Hollywood. It's a big fuck you to the quote-unquote liberal media, not the progressive media, not like Democracy Now!, not like people who are like, I'd say those guys are like pretty legit. I'll disagree with them in a lot of ways, but Democracy Now!, I think they have scruples. Like I respect them, Whereas the liberal media, like CNBC or everybody else besides Fox, I don't respect them, and I don't respect the majority of Fox either. I think Napolitano's cool. I think Stossel's pretty cool.
Well, and see here's the thing that I mean. The right tend to talk a good game and then go do the exact opposite. So, then the question is, which is worse? The people that say good things but are actually lying about it, or the ones that are actually saying legitimately bad things, like talking about socialism and communism, but are honest about it? I mean, which is worse? I don't know.
Yeah.
They're both terrible in their own way.
Well, I mean...
It's like picking a child. I mean, I couldn't.
Well, what I really like about, like Democracy Now! Is... they're still hard on Obama for, all the wars, and
good for them.
And, they're very outspoken supporters of Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, whistleblowers in general,
Okay, so they actually have some principles. I applaud that.
They also go straight after the Democratic Party for their exclusive, process this time around for candidates. There's only 5 Democrats on the stage. There was going to be 2 more, but they actually spoke out against the Democratic Party for waiting too long to do the debates, and then they were told that they weren't invited to the debates. The Democratic Party has been very exclusive, and
sure.
and I think it's really cool. I like pointing that out to Democrats. Once again, a conversation with my buddy, I pointed that out, how the Republican debates, yeah, they're a fucking joke. I'll talk about those with them. But, the Democratic Party, there's only 5 motherfuckers on that stage, it's just fucking ridiculous, and they're waiting to hold the debates to maintain Hillary's lead. It's like, and
it's clearly completely stacked. It's all
totally, because it's like, the sad thing is, like, to a lot of people, especially, you live in Maryland too. So, it's Democrats, it seems in Maryland, they're perceived to be more trusted, and I like to just point that out,
By who?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe because you live in Baltimore County, dude, but by me, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, but by you in Hickville, it's like you live in a more rural area. But Maryland in general,
it's definitely more red, that's for sure. But
like Maryland in general, they always vote Democratic. Like the only
but that's
governor,
but not really though. It's only really the city.
Years was Bob Ehrlich, the only Republican governor.
We have a Republican governor.
Yeah, we have a Republican governor right now.
Okay, so we did just get Hogan. Okay, but it was
a
like
pretty establishment kind of guy, but.
Dude, it's like everybody's mind was blown when Ehrlich got elected. Like I totally remember that, and the only reason he did get elected is because the Democrats just got utterly ridiculous with their candidate choice.
Yeah. So, can we go back to this feminist story?
Yeah. So let's do that. Let me pull up the details. Let me just read a little bit from the article here, so everybody knows what we're talking about. So this is a woman. Her name is Germaine Greer. She's an established, noteworthy feminist. I'm not.
It's a woman named Germaine.
Jermaine?
Germaine, let's spell it Germaine, not like Jermaine Jackson, like with a J.
Okay.
With a G. She's a British woman. I'm sorry, I apologize. It says Australian-born academic and writer Germaine Greer. So she was supposed to have a talk at Cardiff University, a lecture called Women and Power, the Lessons of the 20th Century. Now, this is just, I guess, generic feminist stuff. She wasn't talking about transgenderism. She's never written about transgenderism or anything like that. But apparently, she holds the opinion that a transgender man to woman isn't really a woman. So let me see if I can find the quote here. Apparently, people have decided that because I don't think post-operative transgender men are women, I'm not to be allowed to talk. She says male to female transgender people do not look like, sound like, or behave like women. So anyway, long story short, she's been petitioned and protested, and now her talk has been canceled because apparently she is a misogynist. Let me see if I can find that quote. Oh, come on.
What? Who's saying?
So this was somebody with like a students with the students union. So here we go. Students union women's officer Rachel Melhish, I can't pronounce that, said Miss Greer's view towards transgender women are misogynistic. So I just think it's hilarious when they're hoisted on their own petard. And so now somebody's made a completely subjective value judgment based on their personal opinion about something which is completely unrelated to what she's talking about. She's never written about it before. She wasn't going to be talking about it. It was just an opinion that I guess somebody at some point asked her about, and she voiced her opinion. And for the crime of not having complete and total, unquestioning ideological purity to the, I guess, whoever the most progressive person in town is, they're being completely silenced and shut down, not allowed to talk. Which is just completely insane. I mean, as soon as your ideology requires that you silence people that disagree with you, that's when you have a real problem. But like I said, at the same time, there's a certain amount of schadenfreude because I think feminism is hugely flawed, and this is the logical.
They're reaping the seeds that they've sown.
Well, yeah, exactly. This is the logical conclusion of an illogical belief system. And so as it progresses, I mean, there is no objective rational basis for so many of these beliefs. So they're just left to people's subjective whims, and to basically have a mob rule of shaming people based on subjective perspectives is extremely dangerous. I mean, it's certainly counterproductive in a lot of ways, but it's extremely dangerous. For everybody involved and the rest of society as a whole, because people are legitimately, genuinely afraid of these people. I mean, there are all sorts of people. I remember like a year or two ago, there were stories about some CEO of a very successful company that was fired because of all this hoopla over him supporting a ballot initiative about gay marriage, in opposition to gay marriage.
Yeah.
Which, regardless of your opinion about such a thing, the point is that we have mobs out here that are destroying people's entire names, careers, families, reputations over what are largely... I mean, I get that there's a lot more to the debate over things like gay marriage, but, these are over largely aesthetic opinions. And here's this woman, it has nothing to do with her work. She doesn't write about it. It's just an opinion she had. And yet here she is, having her life's work impeded. She's an author. This is what she does. She goes and talks about these things.
So, I mean, you were talking about, was that a CEO that got fired?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, there's been a couple instances of people,
the funny
like
thing
high-profile people.
The funny thing I thought about that was like, okay, well, this is while you have a president in office who initially said that he wasn't for gay marriage. Obama said he thought it was for a man and a woman.
And then Hillary Clinton said that back in the day.
It's basically like, it's not even like 8 years ago, we got the supreme ruler of the land, Dictator Barry, who says that he's not for it. And then it's funny how that left like ostracism thing works,
It's extremely powerful, especially when they demonstrate, to the whole world that we can not just, shame you and say bad things about you. We can ruin your career.
Well,
this is very real stuff.
See, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's basically like, if you have a company and somebody's, speaking out things that are hurting your company or things that, maybe not everybody else agrees with, I mean,
I think there's a balance.
I mean, you probably wouldn't want that person to be the, the spokesperson of your company, to be the,
I think. Well, let me just throw something in here real quick. I mean, I think like we said before, there is a value to shame and there's a value to ostracism. The problem is really the problem right now is really the internet how it relates to those things, because instead of having like a community decide like this person is harmful to the community and they need to be ostracized, you have people like with the whole Cecil the Lion thing. Did you follow that at all?
I mean, I didn't follow, but I'm
But
aware of it.
you're aware of it.
It's just manufactured outrage.
Right, it's manufactured outrage, and it's people that have no connection to this lion or the issue of endangered species or the issue of conservation or any of that shit. But they're able to just express their outrage through the medium of the internet, and it just sort of amplifies the tool of shame and just it. Like it turns it into something dangerous, whereas on a local, and I'm not suggesting obviously that we like limit the internet or anything like that. I'm just saying that's what sort of happened. I think it eventually it'll correct itself. I hope is my hope. But in cases like that, I mean, yeah, like the left will use shame, and then it'll use it. Like there is no sense of the individual with that, you know?
Well, yeah, that's the problem. It's a very powerful and thus potentially dangerous tool to be used, and the problem is that they're wielding it based on subjective preference and not objective principle.
Right. Like if someone is violating the non-aggression principle in your community, then you're justified in calling for a boycott of whatever they're doing, you know, or just saying, well, I don't want to associate with this guy anymore. He's going around, you know, stealing shit or whatever it is. As opposed to like, oh, this guy doesn't like fucking oatmeal. Like, let's stop hanging out with him. You know what I mean?
Fucking oatmeal. Yeah, no. I mean, freedom of association is very important, and that's why they're using that tool. It's very powerful, and so you know this is why I think we'd be better spent trying to teach people. You know, better time spent better than voting might be teaching people the difference between a subjective preference and an objective principle. Because, like I said, you know, earlier with like the engineering and the physics, you know, you can't have the engineering without the physics. You can't be, out doing these things if it's not grounded in objective principle. And so then you end up with crazy shit like feminists being shut out of a university because she didn't have ideological purity about some completely unrelated issue. But this is the world we live in now. I mean, and that's dangerous.
So switching gears here, we should talk about this interesting story about a cop who was posing as a woman he was posing as a woman on Craigslist and luring men.
Well, now what he did was he posted a picture of a woman on Craigslist. You know, it wasn't him, you know. And he said, I'm this woman, and, you know, come to my house, and I'll give you free oral sex.
Through a glory hole.
Yeah. Well, no. He said, I'll give you free oral sex.
Well, that's what okay.
So and this was in Missouri. And then when the guys get there, you know, it's him behind a glory hole, and he says, I'll only do it behind the glory hole. And he's got a camera set up, and he's taking videos. And it was 60 guys, if I remember correctly. And he would take the videos and he would put them on the internet. And there was also some talk about he possibly might have owned the websites and profited off of it. And then, like, after all this came out, further investigation showed that he molested an underage boy while he was arrested.
While he was arrested?
You know, he arrested the underage boy while the child was in police custody.
Oh, so this wasn't like the kid got caught up in this Craigslist thing. This was like...
Yeah, this is while he was a cop. And like apparently there were other cases as well. You know, it's pretty fucking insane.
So he was just a massive pervert, essentially.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. So he posted videos. So I mean, he obviously had to have like said something. Because you're saying that like these guys didn't know that it was going to be a glory hole situation or something.
Well, yeah. From what I got out of the article, they didn't know it was going to be a glory hole until they got there.
Well, they didn't know they were going to be filmed either, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, they didn't know they were going to be filmed at all. No.
Well, so I mean, they're only being filmed from like the dick side of the glory hole.
Exactly.
Well, so what I'm getting is I'm wondering, like, he must have at some point spoke to them, and this should be documented on video. I just want to know what kind of voice he used.
Yeah, that was really
stuff like ridiculously like fake sounding, like, oh, it's your wiener through the hole. Like, I mean, like it was like some crazy Mickey Mouse sounding shit, like, or did he have like a really good like Maybe he practiced, while
Maybe he
sitting
came
alone
out and
in his
pretended
cop
to be
car.
like the boyfriend and was like, yeah, my girl's around there. She's going to suck your dick.
Oh, see, this sounds like a guy that's thought about this before. You've planned this out. No, that's a good point. That's a very good.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's probably what I would do. So, well, mystery solved.
Case closed.
I guess that'd be more like her pimp than her boyfriend, I guess.
Yeah, something like that.
But so I mean, what's the aftermath? I mean, is that this guy was arrested? I guess that's why it's a news story.
Or was he just given paid leave and he'll be
No,
back?
no,
He'll be back in a half year?
he's apparently in court right now. So
That's good.
What are the charges he's facing? Like some bullshit wiretapping thing, or for straight up rape?
I don't believe you can't film somebody without like the whole you just can't film somebody without their
Consent.
performing sex acts without their consent. So. And then,
So that's
I'm
the
sure
specific charge.
I'm sure there's also gonna be charges for raping the minor as well.
I would hope so.
So
I would hope so.
I mean, how did that come out that they didn't know it before this whole? Because I get with the video thing, like these are videos that are getting posted online. That's one way to find out about it.
Yeah.
How do they find out about the kid?
Yeah, all I've read is that further investigation into the officer. Then they found out about that. So
Well, that's
So
just
we,
classy.
So we had talked about Cantwell earlier, and I think we actually touched on Tucker too, but they both recently wrote articles against smoking weed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually read any of them because I just saw the headline. I was like, this is just fucking retarded. I'm not even going to bother and waste my time. Because I know, because it's funny that Tucker, I mean, I imagine the premises, or from what I heard about it, he was saying that, pot makes you dumb and it makes you lazy. The typical fucking rhetoric that most anti-pot advocates use.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that hilarious because I know he's a big proponent of drinking bourbon. And
Yeah, he has a book called Bourbon for Breakfast.
Yeah.
Is that the book title?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, if that's not alcoholism, I don't know what is.
Well,
Yeah.
it's important to note that it's just Tucker in the article stating his preference, and he does. And at the end of the article, he does call for he speaks out against drug prohibition. So
yeah, no one's gonna argue that these guys don't think that drugs should be legal.
he's just stating his preference. But I just kind of think in the article he was kind of being a dick about it, and I think Cantwell's a dick 90% of the time.
I also think it's wrong to just say that kind of shit about something like marijuana or drugs in general, because I think drugs are an extremely valuable tool, and I think to just come out and just make these blanket statements about something that you don't really know that much about is irresponsible.
Plus, if you want to draw people into your almost non-existent movement, and a lot of people smoke marijuana, it's been my belief for years that marijuana is a gateway drug to libertarianism.
I would tend to agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you do you really want to I don't know, I feel like that's you catch more flies with honey, and this is fucking vinegar, and I don't think it's much good.
The thing is, I mean, but both of them did fully qualify by the end of the article. Of course, I'm not saying it should be illegal. We should end the drug war and blah blah blah. I'm just stating aesthetic preference. Well, then why the hell did you write a whole freaking article about it? Nobody really cares about your particular preferences on something. The whole premise is that they're writing about relatively philosophical things like politics and all this other stuff.
I think
so. To me, it's so if you're going to qualify it to the, you basically your excuse is that I qualify it to the point of my opinion being just a useless opinion and I don't really mean anything by it. Well, then why the hell did you write an article about it? I mean, it just seems like it was just a waste of everybody's time.
To sort of be,
best. And the insinuation there that they're writing an article about is that this is something that's actually relevant and important. I find it particularly ironic that both of them, Cantwell is admitted, openly that he's an alcoholic, which I don't hold against him. It certainly makes it a bit hypocritical. I mean, I think that they have valid criticisms. I don't think that it makes you stupid and lazy. I think. To the extent that they have anything valid to say, they're really just pointing out a correlation that they're treating in the wrong direction. They're saying, pot makes you stupid and lazy. Well, no, stupid and lazy people like pot.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that Cantwell focused on was all the stupid leftists that have infiltrated the Free State Project. the left libertarians, which I completely understand and appreciate why he's so frustrated with them. He points out, oh, they're a bunch of potheads, and that's like their big main issue is pot, so fuck pot. I get where he's I get where he's coming from with his criticism of that, but it's not like the pot made them leftists.
Yeah.
They were leftists that happened to like to smoke pot.
Well, so then, what do you think their goal with these articles was? I
don't know. That's my point. Is like, why would you write something so stupid and useless?
Like I said, I haven't read them, but what I would offer would be that they would prefer that people didn't smoke pot.
Yeah, that's basically all they say. It's like, well, why the hell did you make me read an entire article about how you
like they would like to convince
you like to hang out with people that don't smoke pot? Okay,
they don't necessarily want the state to come and enforce you not to smoke pot, but they would strongly prefer that you did not smoke pot. You know what I mean? And it's just like, why do you even give a fuck?
It'd be like an article about how I like to hang out with people that listen to jazz because then we can talk about jazz music. It's like, okay, that's fine, that's great.
Actually, no, it would kind of be like, exactly. I don't like to hang out with people that listen to heavy metal. It's like you know what I mean. It's more of like I don't like to hang out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it'd be like heavy metal is distasteful to me because the people that listen to it, are vapid people. That
if you play the records backwards,
yeah, who cares?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important question is, Ethan, do you think Chris Cantwell would let Tucker finish in his mouth?
No.
Okay.
What about on his back?
Yeah, dude. When Cantwell's tramp stamp.
I'd say that's more likely.
Yeah.
But I mean, of all things, Cantwell made this thing like, oh, well, for once I agree with Tucker. It's like, wow, about the most inconsequential, stupid thing imaginable.
Hooray!
So I don't know, and to that, I absolutely do believe, like you said, it's a gateway drug to libertarianism. I do believe, I am one of those, use every strategy, throw it all at the wall kind of guy. I'm totally fine with people doing whatever they want to do, including voting if that's what they want to do. But to say, oh, we don't need those stupid pot smokers in our movement, well, there's plenty of incredibly intelligent, productive people that are totally down with anarcho-capitalism, that are libertarian brutalists that smoke a lot of pot. I'm not talking about myself here or anything, but I just don't see what the point is of singling out like, oh, a bunch of stupid leftists smoke pot. It's like, well, okay, but there's no causal link there. So why are you even bringing it up?
Word.
And of course, here I am talking about it. So what does that say about me? I don't know.
Well, speaking of weed, apparently Mexico is considering legalizing weed.
Yeah, dude.
With the goal of hurting the drug cartels.
Exactly. Yeah. Less violence. It's pretty cool. Mexico's waking up. Hopefully, the United States will let them do that. So, I think prohibition in the United States has made Mexico a war zone.
Yeah. No. And I mean their whole like police situation is even worse than ours.
Yep. Oh, sure. I mean, it's completely fucked. Although, I mean, ultimately, the state profits off all that violence. So I think what we're seeing is not, them, like you were saying earlier, like, people voted for it and this and that. I mean, I think ultimately what you're seeing is that the state, it sees how much money it could be making off of taxing the stuff. And so they're finally, we finally, for whatever reason, reached the tipping point where taxing it is more profitable than policing it. And so, I mean, kudos to places like Colorado and whatever that are showing people just how much tax revenue it can generate. Now, of course, taxing it is absolutely atrocious and abominable, but I guess, lesser two evils. I'll take taxing it over just outright prohibition.
Yeah.
It's funny. People say, look at all the tax revenue that was generated in Colorado. Isn't that great? I'm like, no, that's actually fucking terrible. But I guess it's better than spending that money. I guess I'd rather you spend it on schools than prisons,
Yeah.
if that's the false dichotomy I'm going to be presented with.
Yeah. Word. So, yeah, I think that's about it for this week. Till next time, live free. Break the power. Statism's blood break is the blood that is shed. Drenching the flags of the tax bombs in red. Voices by a few at the expense of the many. Sold to the gods in a death machine. You can't justify killing by economic gain. For God, country, and democracy. You can put freedom in gunpoint in a foreign land. You support the troops, then bring them home. I believe that you will do the
the best for you. And I believe that we have the power, have the power. I hate the state, and I know I'm a slave. We can make a break, break the power, break the power. Society owes individuals nothing more than non-interference with natural rights. Once a virtuous person fully comprehends the non-aggression principle, the violence of the state becomes obsolete.